Hey, folks, welcome to the show. Today, we are going to be digging into the topic of money, specifically salary negotiations. You'll hear from our panel about our experiences as well as get some insight on how to be prepared for your own negotiations about money as they come up in your own interviews. We'll touch on speaking with recruiters and give you some resources to help you with your research. This will be a good one. Let's get into it.
Check it out.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the UX+1 podcast. On this show, we discuss various topics under the umbrella of the user experience and product design discipline with a focus on careers. So if you work or are interested in working as a UX designer, a UI designer, researcher, or content specialist, then we're going to have something of interest to you. There's one more special thing about our podcast, and that is who we've invited as our +1. Every week, we invite a guest who is having some difficulty in their UX job search. They could be early career, transitioning from another career, even experienced pros whose careers have stalled. We give them some live coaching and guidance on their specific situation to help get them over their challenges and hopefully see them hired. If you're interested in appearing as a +1 guest, we'll have details for how to do that at the end of the show. So be sure to stick around for that. Speaking of coaching, who exactly are we? So as this is our first episode, I think it's fitting that we introduce ourselves, and I will step back for a moment and hand it over to my fabulous co-host, Crystal.
Thank you, Corey. So as Corey said, my name is Christelle. I have been working professionally in user experience for the past 5 years. I have experience as both a designer and a researcher in the private and public sector. I have also assisted university design studio classes in industrial design, as I hold a bachelor's and a master's degree in that discipline. For those of you who don't know what ID is, it's basically problem solving and designing anything a human interacts with, and UX is a part of that. I am currently a bilingual senior user experience researcher for the Government of Canada in immigration. That means, meaning my team and I conduct UX research and usability testing on products and services when immigrating to Canada. So that can be anything from web applications to interactive PDF forms and to the process itself. And for now, I'm going to pass the mic to Antonio.
My name is Antonio Roberta. I went through a number of different career changes over the last 8 or so years in my search for a career that I thought would fit me the best. I started out as a financial planner. I had degrees in finance and risk management before landing in tech as a product specialist at a small digital textbook company in Asheville, North Carolina. While I was here, I wore many hats in this role. And throughout the 4 years there, I interacted with users on a daily basis, had the chance to solve complex problems, and assisted the development and product teams with our product roadmap. These experiences eventually led me to finding my dream career in UX. I moved back to my native Pittsburgh in 2020, where I'm now a full stack UX designer, solving design challenges and helping to scale a nascent design team in the data quality and anti-money laundering compliance space. And with that little bit about me, I'll hand it back to Corey.
Thank you, Antonio. And see, as we're doing this, we're learning more about each other, as we're, every day as we're going. So, I didn't even know Antonio was a financial planner. So, Antonio, I'm going to need your help planning some finances. Actually, I'm going to get some finances first, and then I'm going to need your help planning them.
Anytime.
Right? So, my name is Corey Nelson. I am a 15-year overall design veteran, and I've been working specifically in the UX space for about 11 years now. So I've worked in a number of different industries, including the healthcare, banking, and fintech, federal government. I even worked in video games for a very short while. We'll never go back and do that again. I'm currently a design lead and manager, and I work in the ad tech and the med tech space. Okay. In 2019, I spun up a business, right, for a product and coaching service to kind of fill the gap for folks who are early career and are learning the craft of UX, right? What I found is that many folks are learning how to make things, right? They're learning how to produce, artifacts from in the UI space, and their training is very surface level, right? They're not being adequately prepared for the user experience job market. There'll be some more written notes about what I do and what I offer in the show notes and descriptions. But if you're interested in that, you can read about that. But that's not the purpose of what we're doing here. What we're doing here specifically today is we have a topic to talk about. And with that, Antonio, what are we talking about today?
Everyone's favorite topic, money.
Money. Show me the money. So we're going to hone in today on a very specific area of money, and that's about the salary negotiation, right? So there's a few points of contention that I'd like to get into. The first one being, like, where do you start? When someone reaches out to you, a recruiter, for instance, like this may be your first touch point for a potential job. Is that where you start, right? Is that where the negotiations begin? There are a number of schools of thought of you start talking about money immediately or you push it off till later. I've got my own opinions, but before I get into my take, I'd love to hear, Crystal, what's your immediate take on
That's a good question.
Yeah, just immediately about where the salary negotiations start and where it's supposed to go?
Well, there's a few different things. So one, it depends if your goal is to have that money, So if the goal is to have that salary, I would say I should see it up front in the description. If it's something that's not there, if someone is trying to hire me through a recruitment company, I would ask for the job description. If it's not in there, I would either pass or ask. I wouldn't actually jump into an interview without knowing the salary. That is my point of view. So my goal is always to get on that first. That's what I would do. And then if that doesn't happen and a company reaches out and you really like that company, in the first interview, I always talk about salary. It's nothing you should be scared about.
Mm. Actually, here in the United States, some laws have actually been enacted. It's happening state to state now, where the salary has to be very clearly stated as part of the job description. Right, this is actually very new. Salary has always been a taboo topic, even for forever. Right, don't discuss your salary. Right, be careful when you're talking about salary. Now it's becoming much more open. Antonio, from your perspective and from our perspective here in the U.S., what do you think about put the number in the description, right, or put the range in the description?
Yeah, the interesting thing is I like to see that, but I don't always trust it. So I don't really know why I don't always trust it, but sometimes you'll see a realistic salary range that feels accurate. Other times you might see, I've seen salary ranges where it's like, $55,000 to $125,000. And it's just like really, really bizarre. And now I think with remote work, it throws a whole new wrench into it, because then you have companies that say, we're based out of San Francisco, but if you live in Cleveland, we're going to pay you the cost of living for living in Cleveland. So what is actually posted on the job description may not actually match what they offer you at the end of the day.
Yeah, I've seen some wild ranges too, and it's on both ends of the spectrum, right? I've seen folks who want someone with 7+ years of experience to come in as a design director, and manage a team of 10+ people, and then put in a range of $80,000 to $120,000, which is crazy, right? That is crazy low for that kind of work. I've also seen stuff where they're offering a design manager like $400,000 a year, which is also nuts. So yeah, it's hard to tell where the reality lies, and unfortunately, sometimes you just won't know unless you talk to them. But to Crystal's point, getting an idea at the very beginning certainly can't hurt. It can definitely save you some time wasted. There was a school of thought, and I followed this school of thought for a very long time, is that you hold off the salary discussion until you've kind of nailed the interview, so to speak, right? So basically, if that team is really excited about you, then there's that chance that whatever salary they may have had in mind, whatever budget they may have had in mind, they might be willing to push more for you if they really like you. But if there's no incentive for them to do that because they don't know who you are first, then you kind of miss out on that. So that's another side of that coin of when should you start talking about money.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I use the job description with the salary as a baseline, and when they meet me, then they have to like me. And then I will offer them what I think I value based on my research and based on my experience. So I definitely think that the salary that they present is not really a mold. You don't have to fit in that. There's always something you can do.
Yeah. And I think confidence has a lot to do with how you talk about salary too, because if you're a senior with, 7 to 10 years of experience, I think you're going to know your worth a little bit more, and you may be more valued on the market, for lack of a better term. But if you're a junior and this is your first design job, anyone who's doing it right now knows that it's an absolute grind to get that design job. And if you've had 300 interviews and you finally get an offer, sometimes you might be like, I'm just going to take that offer.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go with it and go from there. That's kind of what happened with me. I was just happy to have an offer because of the competition. But I feel like that still shouldn't stop you from negotiating.
Yeah, it's a different. It's a kind of a shift in mindset. Like when I transitioned into doing UX, I had never negotiated a salary before, right? That was the first time I'd ever done that, was when I got my first offer to be an information architect. That was my first time I ever did it. And I can tell you, it was nerve wracking. They offered me $63,000. I remember this. And I actually wrote about this when I had a pretty popular post about this. They offered me $63,000, and I knew that was low. I knew it was low. And I knew the number came from the fact that I told them how much I was making already, which I should not have done. But again, I was new to it and I was scared, right? So they said that number based completely on what I was currently making. I talked with them and I interviewed and they liked me. And I said, okay, here's the number that I know it should be at, right? I know for that market, it's supposed to be somewhere between 70 and 80,000. This is what I want. And I remember the recruiter was pissed, right? She was really mad when I went back to her. Yeah, she was not happy. But I said, this is what it's got to be. And she said, she got frustrated. She's like, okay, well, what is it? Is it 70,000 or 80,000? Which one is it? I said, 80,000. And she said, okay, let me go make a call and I'll get back to you. And she called me back a few minutes later and said, okay, you're clear for 80,000. And that was it. It would be some time after that I learned how the recruiting game kind of works. And we'll get into that, I'm sure, on another show. But yeah, without having some solid data to back up, where I was coming from, I might have started my career, very underpaid. So it pays to know the industry you're getting into, the company, the market, and what other folks are making, right? You can't just go with what they say, and you can't go without a reference. So let's talk a little bit about recruiters, right? We mentioned it a little bit, and they're often going to be the first point of contact for a lot of people when you start applying for roles. Either they'll reach out to you, you reach out to them, whatever have you. For reference, there's a difference between a recruiter who works for the company that you're trying to interview with, a corporate recruiter, and then what I call a vendor recruiter, right? This is a third-party firm that the company has hired to find talent for them, right? And they may be looking to fill a role either permanently or under a contract or a contract to hire basis. So those are the two we're going to be talking about: a corporate recruiter and a third-party recruiter or vendor recruiter. Most of us have dealings with vendor recruiters, right? They are the much bigger swath of people out there. I used to joke about this, that I feel that there are more recruiters than there are open jobs in the world, right?
It's true.
If there are 1 million jobs open right now, there are 1,000,002 recruiters trying to fill roles for them. That being said, with them being your first point of contact, and what we mentioned earlier about let's try and get the money conversation started fairly soon, right? Let's at least broach the subject. Let's at least touch on it so that we have an idea what we're talking about. What's the best way to go about doing that? Crystal, what do you think?
Okay, so for me, when a recruiter talks to me, I'm almost less shy to discuss salary at first because I'm not talking with the brand. So it's stressing me less. And I just go ahead and ask them, where can you send me the job description? Because some of them send you stuff. I'm not sure if they're legit. It's companies that I've never heard about. So I want to see if it's real. And if it's not in there, I go ahead and ask, what is the salary range? And if they don't know, then I don't want to have a conversation with them. I get so many of them weekly that I try to filter them out and see. And sometimes I use it as practice, to be honest. This is between us, but
Yeah.
I like to practice for interviews and see what I've done right and what I've done wrong. I don't always think about getting into contact with them to nail it and get the job. I try to practice and see. But I always ask for the job description and the salary. And if they don't have it, I don't want to have first round of interview. I'm a bit aggressive on that part because I like to filter it.
Yeah.
And also what really bothers me is most of them that I spoke to, they have no idea what we do. And they're just like, okay, please slow down. I don't understand those terms. So how will you represent me if I don't know what the salary is? So all of these components play into the same mix for me.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you said that, because that's one of the things that I coach my students to do is yeah, even if you've got a job and you're happy and you're cool with where you are, take those calls anyway, right? It's always good to get practice. Even I do that. Hope my bosses aren't listening, right? But even I do that. I mean, there's nothing wrong. It's like you said, there's no intention that you're trying to change jobs or you're trying to jump ship or whatever. But it's a skill. Interviewing is a skill. Talking to folks and negotiating with folks, it's a skill. And if you don't keep it up, you'll lose it, right? It's just like anything else.
And also networking. You meet people virtually. Why not?
Yeah, that's right. I've had recruiters reach out to me and the call starts and it's over in like 5 minutes. And you're like, okay, that is definitely not going to go anywhere. Right? I have no idea what they were looking for. They don't know anything about me. They wanted to check a few boxes and then they're going to send my resume on and I'm sure I'll never hear from anyone again. So yeah, it's like you said, you have to weed through a lot of crap out there, and asking about the salary is a very good way to do that. Now, Antonio, you're in a bit of a unique situation with the recruiters. Is that right?
Yeah, I am. My fiance is actually a technical recruiter.
All right.
So let's be nice.
Yeah, we'll tell her this episode got corrupted so she doesn't hear this one. Yeah.
Yeah, she I have these conversations with her all the time because she is always sort of caught between a rock and a hard place of needing to act with ethics and having to act with metrics, I guess is the way that I'll say it. Mm-hmm. Right. It's a metric based job and it is a grind. And I kind of feel bad for the people that have to do it because it's like they really gotta talk to people like us in order to survive, in order to make a paycheck. So I kind of see the other end of it. So I understand where they're coming from, and I will empathize with them as any good designer would. But I also think I'm in a unique position where I don't think I'm far along enough in my career yet, having only been in UX for 2 years, that I don't get a lot of contact from recruiters.
Well, we'll work on your LinkedIn profile to fix that.
Wait, can I add something? Maybe that's good. You don't want recruiters reaching out to you.
Yeah. But when I do, I mean, I've had a couple. They've actually been organizational recruiters, so not vendor recruiters, but recruiters actually, looking to hire for their company, internal. And, I've taken the calls, I've taken the interviews with absolutely no intention of actually taking the job. But as you mentioned, Crystal, just to practice, just to make sure that, my skills are staying sharp in case there ever is a need to use them.
What I started to learn and understand about vendor recruiters, and Antonio, you do tell me if your understanding of this from your fiance is the same, is that when they're hired by a company, they're given a bucket of money, right? Basically, I'm trying to simplify it. They tell the recruiter, here's all the money we can give you to get us this person, right? They have one number to work with. And so when they reach out to a candidate, they tell the candidate, here's a salary range. It's within that bucket, right? But it's probably not way at the top, right? It's close, but it's not at the top because that candidate is going to get the large portion of that bucket, and the recruiter is going to get what's left. That's their commission. That's how they earn a living. That's how they work. And so you're negotiating. And this is what happened to me. This is what I found out later. This is what happened to me when I negotiated my first job, right? When they tell you they have to make a call, or they tell you they have to go find out, if they can make the money that I was looking for work. They weren't calling the company, right? She was calling her account manager, and they were trying to work out a new figure for her to take home for her commission, right? So what I asked for was still in the bucket, but she was going to be taking home a lot less, and so she had to work that out. That's been my understanding of how a recruiter's commission works, right? They get a chunk of the salary that you're going to be offered. So there's some incentive for you to make as much as you possibly can, right? So they should, fight for you in that regard. But there's also this kind of cutoff where if you make too much, then they get a lot less, right? So there's a slight, I don't want to call it a conflict of interest, but there's a slight conflict there. There's some, I don't know another way to describe it. I don't know. What's your take on that?
I think that's pretty close to how it works. And I know that another thing that is really important in that field for recruiters is the submissions, right? So your submission rate needs to be really high so that you have the odds of getting a placement out of that submission rate. So I know some of her metrics, I think they want her to make 15 submissions a week, right? So you have to sort of grind all day and call as many people as possible, get as many people on the phone as you can, get as many meetings booked, meet with those people. And then you have to sort of vet them, see if they're good for the position, see how many positions they're good for, and submit them. Hopefully you can submit this person to 4 positions, maybe 2, maybe 3. There's also a lot of catfish. You're mostly dealing with catfish throughout your day, like trying to make sure people are who they say they are, that they're not lying about their residency status, that kind of thing. So the submission rate is also kind of like the main metric that, at least in her case, that she looks at the most. And then once a person is placed, let's say, she places me or you into a position. If I am successful in that position and I stay in that position for 6 months, then my commission is released. If I'm not successful and I get fired or I quit or I don't like the job, then the recruiter does not get that commission.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. I've heard it saying, yeah, it's kind of like a bonus structure. Like if you sign a sign-on bonus somewhere, they'll tell you, well, you're not going to get your bonus for at least 90 days, right? Yeah. And then if you leave the company anytime within the first year, they're going to claw that back, right? So it's pretty similar. Yeah, we should get a recruiter on one day as a guest. We should clarify some of this stuff. But
that would be great, because I feel like the experience that I've had so far with most of the recruiters, they just want to call right away. I didn't even have time to prepare myself. But for me, again, it's practice. It's like, okay, if I have an interview in 30 minutes, how would I do that? It's very stressful, but I like to put myself in situations like that. But at the end of the day, it's pretty aggressive.
Yeah. Yeah. And on the other side of the coin of Antonio's point is me with a lot of experience. I've been doing this for many years. And when recruiters get kind of aggressive with me, or they want to talk very soon, I generally say, like, I can't talk to you today or tomorrow, right? I can talk to you 2 days from now. And I'll give them I put together a Calendly link for, it was like, here's my calendar, right? Instead of doing the back and forth, it was like, here's my calendar, find a spot when I'm free, and then we can talk, right?
I love it.
Yeah. And,
I'm going to steal that.
Yeah. And they actually like that, they're generally pretty good about it, and they'll always find the quickest spot, right? So it's always the next day or whatever that they can find it. But I'm at that point where I'm pretty confident enough to say, I'll talk to you when I have time, right? And let's make sure that it's worth my time to do that. To your point earlier, Crystal, let's talk about the salary range at least a little bit. And I'll play it a little bit, right? Because they'll always ask me, what's your compensation? Like, what do you need? And I'm always like, I don't know what I need, right? But I can, I'm open to hearing what you're offering, right? I'm open to hearing the range that you're working with, right? What I need today might be different tomorrow. Let's just talk about what you have available. And they're usually cool with that, right? You always throw it back at them. What's your budget? I'm perfectly open to entertaining whatever budget you have. And if they come in super low, then we can cut it right there. And no harm, no foul. We both go our separate ways.
Yeah, that's a great point. I like that.
Yeah. So give me a little more about speaking about the confidence piece, right? So that's always going to be a little more difficult for folks who are new, right? When you haven't done this before, when you don't have an extensive career, you don't have a pedigree. How can people build that confidence so that they're okay to ask for what they want?
From my own experience, I would say lots of interviews. Lots of interviews, and try to get your hands into some projects before you start or find that job. Volunteer work, work on Upwork if you need to, finding freelance gigs. Build your confidence up, feel like you have more value than maybe you thought you previously did.
And to add to that, I would go back to the basics as I usually do, but confidence, basically building confidence about talking about salary can be building confidence about talking about a very difficult subject. So if you get to discuss about it more with people around you, maybe it's people in the field or anybody that you can talk to them about it, and even do a bit of research that can help you out when you're discussing that salary, saying, this is why I deserve this, because you're asking me to do this. It takes this amount of time and this and this and that. This is something I use instead of me throwing a big number and they're like, whoa, where did you get that from? Well, this is what I have to do on the daily job, and that's why I deserve that. So discussing it and having basically like facts to back up that number, I think it's something that will definitely help in the confidence. If it's something that they don't think about or discuss on a daily basis, it can be very tricky to just like throw it out there.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point of to back up what I mentioned earlier about pushing the conversation back a bit, because once you've talked to that team, right, you've talked to that manager, you've talked to you're going to be, who are going to be your peers. Now you know a lot more about what you're really going to be doing, and then you can actually say that, right? It's like, well, I've talked to the manager and I've talked with the team, and now I know, this specific point was on the job description, but here's everything that I know about that now, right? There's a lot of work, there's a lot of detail into that, and here's how my previous experience, and here's how some of the projects I've done previously work into that. Right. Because I know that's going to be such a huge deal. Right now you're adding weight, to what you're asking for. Going in with that and going in with the research, like you also just mentioned, that's what you need to have, to be able to back yourself up for the amount of money that you want. And there are some resources out there for doing that kind of research. Salary.com is one, Indeed.com is another, and Glassdoor, right? Those are excellent resources for you to get a baseline for what other folks are being paid in the same or similar position. You take that and you match that with your abilities and what you've heard from the team, and you match those with the job description. And now you have everything you need to negotiate. Yeah,
and there's nothing wrong with practicing by yourself. I do that sometimes, It's basically like an interview. It's a script that you have to manage around. You can't follow every point. But if you practice in talking to yourself and telling them who you are, why you deserve this, and these are the facts, then it's very difficult to not give you that, I find.
Yeah, that's a good point. We should have another show about stuff like that, because when people are coming up and they start to, they're learning the design as a discipline, and they're not learning how to communicate, right? They're not learning just being comfortable in their skin, because, UX it's a high visible position, right? And eyes are going to be on you a lot, and you have to be comfortable talking about the same thing with different people, right? In different ways. So I think we should put that down as a topic for another day.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. I mean, to Crystal's point, role playing is so important. I think when you're trying to practice interviews and nail that, nail those first job interviews, whatever job it is, not even UX, but any job, just kind of, getting your elevator pitch down, so it's one of the hardest questions, if not the hardest question in the world, is tell me about yourself. Like that's that one. I always tripped over that one, and I had to kind of like write it out and script it out and role play it until it just became second nature.
Yeah, yeah, that is a cornerstone of my coaching product, which is being prepared for those interviews. Meaning, here's the question they're going to ask you, right, word for word, or something very close to it. You need to write down what you're going to say, and you need to
Mhm.
memorize it and internalize it. It's going to change over time, right? You'll start getting used to it, but you can't. That's what it means to be prepared. It's a study. And a lot of folks think that, well, I'm good at what I do, so I can just kind of coast through my interviews. Doesn't work like that. Doesn't work like that at all.
I know. I think this mindset comes from, I'm just going to speak about my experiences for a bit. But when I was at school, they were like, get an interview, get an internship, you have to before you graduate. We didn't know, like, we don't know that there's a structure for that. So
Hmm.
we just went on by ourselves, create our portfolio, tried to figure out how to do a resume and how to talk to a company. So I think the fact that it's not really cemented, people are like, I'm just going to wing it. But
Hmm.
there's actually principles that
Hmm.
you have to nail. And then the company, when they listen to you talking, they know that you took time, you took a look at the company, you know what you're talking about, and you're not going all over the place in the
Hmm.
conversation. Because at the end of the day, you're representing yourself. The
Yeah,
resume is not talking anymore. You are talking.
you're right.
So it's important to show them that I took the time to prepare myself, and this is why you should hire me in 4 sentences. I
Hmm.
took all this time to prepare that, and this is my answer, instead of you trying to figure it out 1 minute in front of them and they're just watching you struggle.
Yeah, and that question right there, like Antonio mentioned, tell me about yourself being the hardest one for me. The hardest one was that one. Was why
Me
should we
too.
why should we
Yeah.
hire you? Right? Like, I don't know, because I need a job. That's why you should. Right? But you can't go in
It's
with
a
that.
tough one.
Yeah, it's not easy to answer, but if you write it down, you really think about it, right, and you tie it back to what they're looking for, then you'll be prepared to answer. All right, let's talk about our guest today, Antonio. Who is our plus one?
Today we have on the show George Caiella. He is actually coming from a graphic design background. His resume and portfolio are kind of directed more towards that profession. It's
Mm,
very art oriented.
mm,
Um, and this is kind of his first wall to get over. So we want to kind of help him reorient his portfolio towards UX design, solving problems, and kind of help him leverage his past experience going into his new career path.
got it. Sounds good. Let's bring George in. Thank you, everyone. We have our plus one guest joining us today, Mr. George Caiella. How are you today, George?
I'm good. How's everyone doing?
Doing well, doing well. Thank you for agreeing to appear on the show with us. This is super exciting for us, and we're really excited for you to get you some help and get you some coaching and see if we can help you get over some of the challenges that you've been having.
I appreciate that. Thanks for having me. Really looking forward to the opportunity.
Fantastic. To get us started, would you mind just giving us a little bit of background on yourself, your career up to this point, and some of the actual challenges that you've been having and which you'd like to get some help with?
As you just mentioned, my name's George, last name Caiella, and I started as a graphic designer in college. I got my degree in graphic design. It was a Bachelor of Fine Arts with concentration in graphic design, to be more precise. After school, I had a little bit of trouble just even getting a job right out of school in the design world. And I talked to some friends, and they were also having trouble just getting that experience and getting into it. And I finally got my opportunity, and I did a couple freelance projects for a few companies. And then as it progressed, I got my full-time job in New York. And, getting that job really helped solidify things a little bit for me. I just felt like it was finally like I had kind of made it in the design world, you could say. Not made it, but made it in the sense of, okay, I'm in New York now and I have some opportunity. I think, it's fashion capital. So I just felt like trying to get into that niche, I finally had an opportunity to see what I could do. And I had a great 4 years there. And then with the pandemic, like most people, we did a lot of accessories. We did a lot of handbags, wallets. We did uniforms. We did backpacks, a little bit of everything. And the places we're in, the bigger Target, Macy's, Nordstrom, all those companies, with everything shutting down, they weren't able to support our business anymore. So we had to make some cuts and lay some people off, and that's what happened. So I took some time naturally, like most people did when the pandemic started. Then I was like, what could I do to better myself and what could I do different? I had struggled so much previously. I was like, I need to do something instead of wasting this time. That's when I decided to try to make that little bit of a transition to UX. I'm one of those who didn't know as much about it. I'm going to be honest. My brother had always told me about it, and he had always told me, because I would see the jobs for graphic design when I'd always see UX, UI roles. And I would see, granted they're more money, but I was like, with that comes more knowledge, I would assume. So I started to dig into it, and he works for Google. So he actually told me, he's like, they have certification programs, something you should look into. So I tried the Google UX program. It was a 6-month accelerated program, and is the equivalent of 1 year in the workforce. And I just really took my time with it. I completed in about 8 months because I didn't want to rush the process. I really wanted to try to grasp and learn as much as possible. So I ended up completing the course, getting my certification. And now I'm kind of in that loophole of what I was mentioned previously, where I knew there was something different to it, where I'm starting to see, I read more articles, I've seen some stuff Corey's been posting. And that's how I came across this page, just searching the UX world and searching on LinkedIn. I came across Corey's page. And, I read his post daily pretty much when he talks about it. And I've seen some other UX pages where it just talks about how different they actually really are. And I could see, maybe my resume, my portfolio is a little more graphic based because that's where I come from, the world I come from. And I'm really just trying to, grasp and get as much coaching as possible because it is new to me. And, I want to make that transition into UX. And I get it. You still keep your graphic design roots, but they are different in that sense. So just really, that's where I'm kind of at right now. Just really looking to see what I could do next. And really, I'm just excited to see where the design world could take me, is why I wanted to do more. And like I said, educate myself further.
All right. Are we ready to dig into George's resume? So let's dive right in. So as you mentioned, kind of just when we got started, your resume is pretty graphic oriented, right? And that's okay. That's what you know. But here we are to streamline this so that it's you are giving the folks who are going to peruse through this, which is 2 people, right? It's going to be recruiters and it's going to be hiring managers, and sometimes you'll even have your peers go through this. Hiring manager might give your resume to his team and ask for feedback. So this needs to be, that needs to be your audience, and we'll keep that in mind. So the illustrations, the icons, the logos, you do not need them. This adds to there's a lot of space that I think your resume could use, and having a lot of this imagery kind of takes away from that. Even your personal logo there, I think that looks cool. That probably, you can probably keep that on your website. You don't need it on your resume though.
And again, I know me and you briefly when we had met last time, we kind of talked about this, and we talked about it. I'm probably going to get into that more now, but I kind of actually purposely left it this way for this process to kind of dive even further into it.
Yeah, so you were already on board that this is what I need to. Gotcha.
And again, and that's why even when I reached out to you originally, for everyone listening, is why, like, I felt it needed some changes and tweaks, but it's kind of just how I had it. And I wanted to start applying because I wasn't really working. I was trying to get my name back out there and trying to start the process, but I definitely knew it needed work.
So for your graphic design background, right? So that's where you're coming from. So what we don't want to do is to hide your background, right? We just want to kind of focus it so that the work that you showcase is relevant to getting into UX. There's a couple of items on here that we noticed. This role here is a sales manager, and this role here is your bartender. This doesn't add to your UX ability, right? Mm-hmm. So these you can feel free to take off, right? You don't need them at all.
That was more of a gap issue. I wasn't sure how that would apply if for having a gap on my resume.
If people ask you, then you can tell them. But I think it's when you get into, from my experience, when people ask about a gap on your resume, they're probably not going to hire you. That's an unfortunate truth. For the most part, people are generally okay with stuff like this, unless you've got this big glaring hole in your background. You're transitioning from a graphic design career, and you did some work in the meantime. I think that's pretty. I think you're going to be given the benefit of the doubt of that, especially if you've got strong work to showcase for it. We see this quite a bit, right? Yeah. This kind of progress bar for your skills and such. And the problem with these is that they're arbitrary, right? They don't match to something. Like when we say highly advanced in Illustrator, it's like highly advanced on what scale, right?
Yeah.
From what to what. You don't need this. I would remove the things that aren't design, like, or UX specific, like drawing and painting. That's great, but that's not going to help you get a UX job. Microsoft Office, I don't think you need to call this out as a skill. And we're going to be jumping around back and forth because we kind of jumped around when we made
no
these
problem.
notes. This two column approach, I'm not a big fan of it. I think resumes read easier when it's just one single column. Right.
Yeah.
So you'll have your header, summary, your skills, and then your experience, right, and your education. So speaking of which, you've got your school down here, and then you have your certification up here. Your certification, honestly, is it should be at the same level as your schooling.
Yeah, I actually had it down there, but I actually just moved it up recently. Just like I was like, maybe just to bring more attention to it because I was applying for UX roles. So that was my thinking on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was actually down under education previously, like
Okay.
down there with it. But I felt like having at the bottom of the resume, I was thinking of like more of a hierarchy thing. So that was my thinking on that.
The fonts that you've chosen here, and I believe Crystal, you had made some notes about the choice of fonts and the choice of decorations and such that you use for your headings and your titles and such.
When I look at your resume, please don't take this anything in a wrong way.
No,
I can't differentiate the title. Like, I don't know what you've done versus what you've accomplished from it, because one of the negative space, I feel like there's not enough of that. And I don't know if it's the same font from the same, basically from the column to the left and to the right. Maybe it's the spacing between the letters, but that gives me an idea of everything is just there. So I'm not sure where to focus on. So it's very important to use hierarchy, especially like Corey mentioned, your audience is either a recruiter and a manager, so they don't have time. So my eye needs to glance like quickly, like designer, freelancer, designer. And I feel like I'm not able to pick that up because of what's going on. I think if you add a bit of breathability, that will help a lot. So negative space and spacing between those titles, and keep it the same language. So like profile has a lot of space between the letters versus the next one next to it, like designer or work experience. I'm not sure if that's the same thing. And that's where I'm having difficulty with hierarchy, picking up, like, highlighting what's the most important to look at.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely, especially more recently when I added the certification and by trying to add the Adobe XD and the Figma ones under there, even though I know we talked about removing them, I felt, even too as a designer, and I could see that it's cluttered, but I was trying to keep it on one page. And like I said, this is the kind of layout I had a feeling it needed to be changed. And I just wasn't sure of what direction it had to go yet. I knew it needed change, but I didn't know exactly where. So I could definitely relate to what you're saying with it feels, as soon as I added it, I was like, it just feels cluttered to me as well. So
yeah, and when you do that, it's gonna give it a sense of unity. Like I know that I'm gonna look here. This means that, and this is where usability comes in play as well. So and aligning those. So like the contact, like all of these sections, but same as Corey, usability wise, it's easier to actually read it from top to bottom. You can't reteach a human being to read otherwise. We went to school every day to read like from left to right. So it's very hard to like switch that up on someone. So that's why it makes it difficult, I would say.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Good UX resume is a boring resume, right? It's pretty boring. It's pretty flat. It's pretty utilitarian, right? But those are the ones that absolutely perform the best.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. Like I said, this was geared towards my design job previously, so that's probably why it's a little flashier. And it had less previously as there was less experience. The top one, the designer's accessory direct one, that wasn't there. So that's a big, and the certification wasn't there. So there was a lot more visual breathability.
Yep.
But for sure. And then the side column didn't have like XD and Figma. So there was a lot more space between everything. So maybe at that point, like the titles and whatnot were maybe a little easier. So I could definitely see Crystal's point though about, that now and Antonio's about bringing that whole thought process in. So I could definitely see what you guys are saying with that.
Cool.
I've already made changes even too. It's not on this one, but like even the profile, the wording on that, just it seemed off too, because a lot of these jobs, you know, they're looking for multiple years of experience, and I kind of right away off the bat kind of say 1+ years. So I actually changed the wording on that already on a resume that I'm working on.
Yeah, when you get a bunch of years of experience, you can probably work that back in. But yeah, for now, let them pull that out of your experience, and let them do the work on it. Other quick minor things like you don't need your physical address.
Yeah, I took that. I actually took that off now too. It just says Pittstown, New Jersey, and then it says open to relocation bigger.
Okay. And your hobbies also don't need to include that either. What else?
Yeah, I'm actually gonna go more the layout how you showed me based on the previous article that for those listening to, it's me and Caiella talked about a previous article that he read, a few years back, I believe it was, where the top recruiters, top people of companies. So I want to go more of that, just base black and white to the point, those levels of hierarchy that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I kind of, after our conversation that night, I kind of started it, but I left it like this purposely for today, so I could get even more out of it. Cause I'm one of those people, how we talked about the more knowledge, like to me, it's like you said, don't take anything personal. I would never, because that's why I'm doing this. Like, I want to be able to grow. I want to better myself. So I'm really appreciating all that's going on right now. So
awesome.
That's great. Sorry, Gar, I'm going to jump in. I love your mindset because this is design. You'll get critiqued literally every second. So you kind of have to be good with it,
I mean, I learned it over the years. If you can't have, thick skin in this, you can't be in it.
You can't do it.
There's always going to be a critique. Even if you have the most experience out there, there's going to always be someone that could critique it. So, I mean, all you can do is just take it and just keep improving. And that's what we're here for. So.
Yeah. Of course. And no matter how much you work on it, like it will never be perfect, but at the end of the day, you need to look at your resume as a product. This is something that you're delivering for someone, and that someone is your user, and that user, it's a manager or it's someone from HR or recruiter, regardless. Do they know what it means when they look at it, and can they use it properly? So for example, if I would want to print that at my house or wherever I'm working at my office, I'm not sure it's going to be the same way that it's delivered on the screen. So these are the little things you need to look at and think about. Think about your resume as a product, like the whole life cycle of it. And you're a graphic designer. It's like if you would have a client and you want to design a logo for them, how would you do that? This is the same for the resume, but you need to add that aspect of usability and functionality. So I think my point for you would be, take your background, don't forget about it. You come from graphic design, but push into UX and make it usable and show them that you understand those principles and they understand what your resume means, and they can tell who you are in 5 seconds.
Yeah, especially too, even when you just mention it, like that's like the cool thing, like that I've started to learn with UX is like you think like you're thinking of all these different things, and admittedly I know this needed work, but for the purpose of this, like I said, I have left some things, but it's just amazing too. Like, didn't even think, like you think of all these different things, but like, boom, a printer. Like, I wouldn't want to print this. I want to print black and white and save my color ink.
Yeah, and do you know how the green transfers? I don't know. I might be as bad as the black, so I might not see your name. I might just see George.
Exactly.
Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, or if I'm colorblind and you don't know what that's going to look like on a screen reader.
These are all great points.
And in this whole interview process that you're going through right now, it's almost like a user test. You're user testing your portfolio, you're user testing your resume, and you are learning how to rapidly iterate based on user feedback. If you don't get a callback, if you don't get the second interview, that's user feedback that you can use to then iterate on your product to make it more usable for your audience, for your users. So it's such an important thing to get into UX. It's really important to live and breathe the process in every way possible. So any way that you can inject the design thinking UX process into every part of your life becomes natural. And you will see these things and pick up on them just by instinct.
That is such an excellent point that I never considered. right? That you're,
That's so great.
yeah, that this is part of, your user feedback. And that is such an excellent point.
Yeah, because you'll go through those, when you get that UX job and you design something and you feel really great about it, maybe your team feels really great about it, and you get it in front of users and they just shoot holes through the whole thing, and it's the same kind of thing. So that thick skin, it's good that you have that. It's good you have this mindset, and it's just building that muscle memory to think like a UXer now.
Yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, I mean, coming from the graphic world, I'm like, when I was doing it, and even on my portfolio site, like I was like, oh, cool, I'll just make it where it kind of plays off my resume, has the same use of color and stuff, so they kind of all are cohesive and go together. Was my logic on that. And then I'm like, okay, cool, I'll put the green. I chose the green honestly just because, okay, I'm like, cool, pop of color. But as a graphic designer, you're not really thinking, okay, what happens if someone is colorblind, or these are, it's just transitioning your mind. And that's one of the, and we talked about, there are differences that graphic designers just don't see right off the bat. And that's a huge one right there. You're not really, I mean, you think about your colors and the way they mix. Yeah, for sure. But you're not really like, okay, maybe someone might not, or how does that? Yeah, you print stuff and you test stuff, but you think of that. But just that was a great point you made about someone might not even see that green at all.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the details from your experience here. And we can start here. One of the things that jumped out at us is you've got this line here that says 1 year relevant work equivalent. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means? Because that raised all of our eyebrows when we saw that.
It's actually a recent addition as well. My thinking on that was like that it was in the same process of moving that from education from the bottom of the resume to the top. And when I did that, I kind of just added that line because I was trying to just give a little more background on it and trying to let people, hiring managers, whoever may be looking at it, I want them to know like that it was the equivalent of, as the course put it, they said, like I said, it was an accelerated 6-month program, and it's the equivalent of working one year as a UX designer in their eyes, based on the experience you're getting. Like, it's more of like an entry level 1 year job, so to say. And I think I just kind of put that because, again, maybe I'm thinking too much. Like, yeah, now I'm going to take off the bartender experience. I'm going to take off, the in-store experience at the bottom. I think it was just getting nervous. Like, people are seeing it as like having that gap again, and just trying to really show that I'm trying to work at it and trying to gain experience. So I think that was my logic on that.
Okay.
Actually, it was just a quick ad recently too. I didn't have that for a long time, but I felt like I wasn't getting any hits at all. So I was just like, okay, let me just add this and see if that makes a difference, bring it to the top. I was trying to do little changes before redesigning the whole resume, which I'm going to do now, obviously, after our conversations.
For context, I think we're all in agreement that you can go ahead and take this off, because I don't personally feel that this is true. Right? Yeah. This feels like you're kind of stuffing it a little bit. I think I would say I'd be fairly confident that folks by now know what this Google course on Coursera is. I don't know if everyone has a lot of intimate detail with it. I know I don't. Maybe one day one of us here will go will volunteer to go through the course. I think this is fine to kind of stand alone on its own. And I get that you're trying to balance your resume with this, right? But it reads poorly, and then it starts to just read not well at all. Like, first it starts off kind of bad, and then it gets worse, right? So you say Google UX design by Google on Coursera, Google UX design professional certificate. So it just reads kind of poorly, and then it just kind of keeps going. I would probably.
Can I add to that before
go ahead.
you translate, Corey?
Yeah.
And be careful when you use different size of fonts, like on that line. So like Google UX design, there's the 1 year, it's smaller. So be careful, try to stay consistent and think about what that means. So if I read your title, basically this is your help section. Like, I'm supposed to get more information on it, but it doesn't tell me anything.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, for sure.
And one of the other things that the team and I talked about was your first 2 points for your previous experience. You were talking about, well, you have to take off the bartending and the sales manager stuff. Yes, you will, but that's okay, because you really need to nail this first one and the second one. Like, when people look at your resume and they look at your previous experience, they're going to spend most of their attention on your most previous one. And then they're going to put a little bit more attention on your next one. And if these 2 don't hit the mark, then you're done. right? So whatever's under here doesn't matter anyway. You need to nail these two. The first thing that caught our eye, again, like what Crystal mentioned, is you have these differences in the decoration for how you're doing your title and your like the time you were there. This pandemic caught our eye. We weren't sure what you meant by including this as well.
Yeah, that was just a way of trying to show that's why I stopped working there, I guess, instead of just putting 2020. That was my thinking on that. Just, I mean, it's obvious I could just write through 2020 and then explain if I got an interview, I guess. I was trying to show that's why. A big thing for me with my whole resume was that's why I added the 1 year relevant work. That's why I kept those other jobs. Like I get nervous with the whole gaps and everything and the questions of like, oh, why'd you stop working?
Okay. Yeah, so I got you. So your concern is, since the pandemic happened, you haven't worked regularly within the design realm.
Yeah, I did the class for about 8 months.
Right?
Yeah, I did that for about 8 months, and then I did some freelance projects throughout. And then I went back like just bartending on the side, just to make some money while I'm trying to get something in between. Because during the day, I like to try to focus my time on trying to apply for jobs and stuff.
Okay. Are you still freelancing?
Just a little bit, but not as much right now.
Okay. If you're doing any kind of freelancing or any kind of consulting, then go ahead and adjust that this is still current. That'll help, I think, a little bit. And you won't need this. You don't need this anyway, where you have 6-month contract. They can catch that. Let me switch over to your website here. All right, my friend. So upon opening this, your website screams graphic designer, right?
Yeah.
It literally screams graphic designer. So it kind of the same mentality about your website as, along with your resume. Simple, utilitarian, gets the job done a lot better, right? It's just easier for folks to really find what they need to understand what you can bring. And personally, I think it's easier for you as the owner of this to maintain it. Some of the details I remember we talked about was your font here is really small. I think this would raise eyebrows about the accessibility of your website here. Also, for such a large body of text here in the middle, this being center aligned makes it difficult to read as well. So pretty much when in doubt, always left align, right? What else did we have? So I just lost my place, y'all. Did anyone?
Oh, it's okay. We can jump in.
Thank you.
Can you scroll a bit up?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So yeah, if you look at this, just adding what Corey was saying, the font is small, but again, I feel like I'm going to repeat myself. I'm sorry, but because I feel like there's a lot of different sizing of fonts going on. The only thing that pops to me is I'm George, your name. So I don't know what that means. Like, okay, cool. What do I do next? So then if you scroll down, we see like a picture of sneakers. So in my head, I'm like, okay, are you a sneaker designer? I'm not sure. So those are the things you want to think about. And your picture as well. I think on the first page, it should be your project. This is because again, it's like your resume. You have 5 seconds. So if the user is scrolling, if they will continue and magically land on your project, you're lucky. But if they don't, then they don't know what they're looking at. That's what I'm gonna add. Antonio, you can jump in whenever you want. So then we go on to your portfolio section, and I think those are clickable, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when we went on those, I think I remember they were pretty long for us to get to the point of what the project was.
Yeah, so that's the graphic design section now.
Yeah, so if I would look at that, I'm not sure, like, I don't know what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, what is that? But I don't. So it's important to always keep that in mind. Like, what are you trying to show us in a very like quick, fast way? And then in the interview, if they want to see more, then you can present a deck. But if it's too long, then they won't get to see what you want to present, whatever you want to present from A to Z.
Yeah, and here's an unfortunate bias that you're going to have to contend with coming from a graphic design background, right? When we talked earlier about kind of downplaying your graphic design background, we want to we're not going to hide that you're a graphic designer, but we're just going to kind of focus your strengths, from being a graphic designer to doing UX design, right? Having this kind of project up on your UX design portfolio can completely undo all of that. If someone is looking to hire you for a product design, UX is, kind of strategy design position, and they pull this up, you're going to get immediately eliminated, right? They're not going to want to talk to you if they see this. Again, it's not fair, but that is the unfortunate truth. Anything that is solely graphic design oriented, you're going to need to either remove or you need to rework into a UX focused project.
Yeah, I would add to that, when I see that, my first initial reaction is like, okay, this person isn't focused on user problems. And, getting to this site, I see that it's difficult for me to find the work. It's also on a PDF, which isn't always ideal for your site. Kind of just like rotating thumbnail, it also moves pretty fast. So it's kind of difficult if I want to get to a certain project and it goes away from me, I don't immediately know how to get back to that project. So there's some usability issues there.
Yeah, on the mobile, I have them like just stacked, and I think that's easier. But
yeah,
I was just trying to like make it so it was a little something to it. But I guess sometimes less is more.
Less is more.
Yeah.
When you're starting out and you're trying to get your first design job, your portfolio should be bare bones, really simple. If it were me, I wouldn't even put in the graphic design stuff if it didn't have any sort of user-centric problem associated with it. And then once you get more experience, once you kind of get your foot in the door, you can kind of layer some of that stuff in as like a playground section. Like, here's some stuff about me. Here's the stuff that I like to do, and layer in the fact that you're a graphic designer and that you like visual arts, and layer that in. But you've got experience now, you've got real world projects that you can display. So a hiring manager is going to be like, all right, this guy knows his stuff in UX, and it's cool that he also does this other stuff. I have time, if I really like him, I'll look at it. But
That makes sense. I guess my question would be then, like, where if you click into one of these like UX ones, like again, they're just displayed as like PDFs, like you said. Like, I don't really know the best way to, display all this on the site.
So I'm going to borrow something that one of my other students came up with because it was a really good analogy. So I'm just going to steal it. Evan, if you're listening, thanks. When you're considering how to put together your case study on your website, think of your case study as a movie trailer. A movie trailer just shows highlights, just shows you kind of high points. It's not necessarily linear, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be in order. It's just highlights. It's just things that you really want to point out that were unique and interesting, that you want to get the point across of what transpired in this project, right? That's all it is. It doesn't need to be super cohesive, right? It's just highlights. If those highlights are interesting enough, right? If they can see, okay, this was an interesting problem. It's like, okay, this was something unique that he had to solve. Your case study has done the job. They're probably going to want to talk to you after that. When they talk to you, then you give them all the rest of this. This is your movie, right? Now you're past the trailer. This is your full movie. That's how you kind of break this apart, because no one is going to sit on your website when they're trying to just evaluate who, how strong of a designer they think you are. This doesn't really give them that, right? This is a lot of process, right? We don't really know. It's hard to just kind of look at this and judge, do you really know what you were doing, right? But you can talk about this, right? When you get someone on the call or on the line, you can talk, for at length about what you were trying to do here, and help them understand. But they're not going to sit and read this on your website, right? They're just not going to do it. So you don't need to give them a lot to try and figure out. Just give them the highlights. Make sure your highlights are awesome, and let them call you, and then you give them the rest. Does that help?
Oh yeah, for sure. So I guess like if you go to the top of this one, like there's like the actual, like those are actual on that first page of the blue one. Those are actual like links of the working prototypes. Like I don't know.
Yeah, about this. I'm glad you said this. If you have clickable prototypes, I always say these are great to have if you have them. Never ever assume anyone is going to click on them and use them, right?
Yeah.
Right. Never assume that. Actually, I would usually assume that they're not going to do that. Right? So if you have something within either of these prototypes that you think is really critical and you really want to make sure people see, then they need to be in one of these screens below as a static image with some caption or supporting text next to it. If someone is super thoroughly interested, then they might go back and click on one of these and go and check it out. But I would never assume that they're ever going to do that.
I'm going to add to that as well. Think about your project as a book. You know, when you go buy a book, you have the abstract. You can't tell them literally from A to Z what's going on, but in the abstract, there's the intro, there's the problem, how we solved it, and this is what we came up with. So maybe go back to your pen and paper and go through like an old school technique. I always tell that to everyone. Write it down. I know you want to sketch, you can sketch, but you can write it down. Okay, this is what's important in my story, and then just go through that, and it'll help you just put that together instead of, you know, fixating and be like, oh my God, I have so much stuff I want to say. But what is the most important thing you can say in a sales pitch? That's what you want to think about.
Yeah, good point. And you won't know what that is until you have it all, right? So when you're sketching and you're trying to find that stuff, don't limit yourself there, right? Lay it all out, write it all down, capture all of it, right? And assume that, okay, this is my entire case study. I have everything in here. Now I know I need to go back and cut it in half, right? I need to cut at least 50% out of this. And so that'll start to help you think, what's the most, you know, what do I need? What's really important and what's supportive, right? What can I get away with taking out? And then I can just talk about later. For example, you've got a couple of pages of personas here, which is another thing, right? You probably don't need to include personas like ever really, but you know, if you've got one, or if you've got three, just go with one. You know, what is the, you know, can you get the same impact with just one, or can you get the same impact with just a short paragraph about what your persona was or something, you know, that kind of thing. Because these artifacts, they don't carry a lot of weight, right? Especially when you're new. When I see personas on folks who are just coming up in their design career, it's hard to take them seriously, because doing persona work specifically, I don't know how I got on this, I'm going off on a tangent, but doing personas really well and to do them really to do them correctly, it takes a lot of time. They're really expensive, right? And for someone to do this by themselves over the course of a week or so is just not realistic. This can help cut some of your case study, you know, immediately just by pulling this out. And you can talk about the problem you were designing towards instead of the person, right? Because the person is less important at that point.
We did, on the persona thing, we, you know, where I work now, we have 5 personas, and it took us about a year to nail them. And they're still constantly being iterated.
Yeah.
And what Crystal said is really, really good advice. Create a narrative. It's a story. You want people to be very, very interested in it. So even if it helps to sit down and just type out exactly what you did, create a story of what you did, and then kind of groom it with all of your nitty gritty stuff and chop it up, that narrative is going to make people want to read and be very interested in your whole study.
Did you actually code yourself, or did you use like a Squarespace or a Wix, or any recommendations on that front? Because I did a lot of research on it, and I don't mean, maybe that's a question you don't want to answer, I don't know. I went with Wix just based on research, but I don't know if there's a better way to go about it out there.
I'm so glad you asked that. I think we're all kind of grinning. It was like, because I think we might have talked about that already, but the only wrong answer for this is don't code it yourself, right? There's no reason for you to ever code your own website, and even low code stuff like Webflow. There's no reason for you to do that. Find something that's easy for you to maintain, easy for you to implement, and put your work up on it. No one will ever question you about the details and the guts of how you put your portfolio together.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I totally agree. Make it as simple as possible. I'm a tech nerd, so I did Webflow because I enjoy doing that stuff as a hobby. But it is a stressful and steep learning curve for your first portfolio when you're trying to get a job on top of it. So I recommend just keep it simple, but keep it, you know, tight and clean.
Yeah, okay, I've even seen people who've sent me portfolios to look over who did it in Notion, right? That's perfectly fine. I mean,
my prototype.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
And to add to that, like, let's say you're going through the process of, building your portfolio online, there's nothing wrong to give it to, I don't know if you live with family or you have a roommate, give it to one of them, ask them if they can find, elements on your website. And this is when you'll know, okay, I really need to work on that section. They don't understand it how I understand it. It will help you a lot to ask around, if you're giving it to someone that has no idea what you're doing and they understand it, then you just nailed it right there. So It's important to ask for help. I know we can always be like, I can do it by myself, I'm the expert, but sometimes the experts are the people that will be using it as well. So have some help, ask some friends. If you're with family or roommates, it doesn't take time and they'll help you a lot. That's something that I always do. Even with your resume, you can print it and give it to them. Be like, what do you see when you look at this? Like you're kind of doing a bit of research on your end too to even perfect it. And it's going to help you answer those questions or assumptions, or even you were telling us stuff you were scared about. But if they see it and they understand, then you're fine and you'll be confident about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's even why, like, when Corey, had brought this whole opportunity to me, that's why I was like, and he had mentioned he's approached other people about it and they were hesitant. People weren't sure, like they didn't want to be putting their stuff out there, I guess, perhaps, or be on camera and get like their stuff kind of like ripped down and to build back up. Like, I was like, to me, I don't know, it seems like a no-brainer. Like, if someone, like the way I looked at it, if someone sees this who is hiring or something and they're like, they see it before, if anything, they could loop back in and see where it became and where it went to, and see that I have the ability to, take feedback and I could do the work, like with just a little bit of, guidance maybe per se or something. So to me, it's just kind of, that's the whole reason I did it. Like, I appreciate you even going through this, like I said, and so that totally makes sense about like showing a family member or something. But I figured, why not in this case, just, people who have been in the industry and know what they're doing. It's like a golden ticket getting your guys' feedback. So
yeah,
of course.
Yeah, and to add to what Crystal said, I'll give you one extra point on that, which is when you hand your stuff, particularly your case studies and your portfolio, to other people, you want to ask them a very simple question, which is, can they tell you what exactly you did here? That's all they need to be able to answer. They don't need to understand the details of how you got it done and UX process and all that. They don't need to understand that. They just need to be able to tell you, okay, I see that you did this, right? This was your job on this. If they can tell you that, then your case study is in a good place.
I agree. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Well, George, that's what we had for you tonight, my friend. Any other questions for us?
No, I don't think so. I just really want to take a quick second just to thank all three of you, especially you, Corey, for setting this up, and then Crystal, Antonio, just taking the time out of your busy schedules and your night to give me some feedback and advice and really try to help me out. It's greatly appreciated, and hopefully down the road soon I could show you guys what I came up with, and hopefully it hits the mark and I touch some of those points you guys brought to me today.
Love it. Sounds good. Well, all right. Well, with that, we are going to wrap up this segment. Thanks again for agreeing to appear on our show with us as a +1. This has been,
of course, thanks
fantastic.
For
having me. All right, and we will be in touch again real soon.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate you all.
Thank
Everyone
you.
have a good
Good
night.
luck.
All right, thank you.
Have a great night.
So we're gonna close here with that. Some of the resources that we mentioned, the websites, I'll have that in the description or the show notes. And that's going to be a wrap for today. So if you are interested in appearing on our show as a +1 for an opportunity for some coaching by us, or if you're a professional and you have an organization or a special area of interest related to UX that you think we can talk about in the show, we have a form that you can fill out at uxdesignjob.com/podcast. Again, that's uxdesignjob.com/podcast. That's a wrap for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Please share this podcast with anyone in or interested in the user experience discipline. We sincerely appreciate your support. We'll see you next time. And remember that when you RSVP, to always include your +1. Take care.